My hands trembled as I cleared the last table of the night, the clink of silverware against porcelain plates seeming unnaturally loud in the emptying restaurant. The air was thick with lingering aromas of truffle oil and expensive wine, scents that would have made my mouth water if exhaustion hadn't deadened my senses. 15 hours on my feet. 15 hours of forced smiles and yes, sir, and right away, ma'am, while my body screamed for rest. Harper, Table 7 needs their check. Marco, the floor manager, didn't look up from his tablet as he barked the order. I already dropped it, I whispered, my voice hoarse from overuse. He didn't acknowledge my response. My reflection caught in the polished silver of a serving tray, sallow skin, dark circles beneath once bright eyes, blonde hair hastily pinned back hours ago, now falling in limp strands around my face. I barely recognized myself anymore. 26, and already worn down to nothing. But none of that mattered. Only one thing mattered: Lily, my beautiful 8-month-old daughter who was currently being watched by Mrs. Patel from next door. A kind widow who had become my salvation these past months. But even saints had limits, and I was pushing mine by working double shifts. A wave of dizziness washed over me as I stacked plates too high, my vision briefly tunneling to pinpricks of light. I hadn't eaten since the half sandwich I'd wolfed down 9 hours ago. Money for food, or money for Lily's antibiotics. It wasn't really a choice. Final table, Harper. Don't screw it up. Marco nodded toward the corner booth, the one partially obscured by an ornamental Japanese maple, reserved for VIPs and regulars who preferred discretion with their $400 bottles of wine. I squared my shoulders, took a deep breath, and made my way across the restaurant. My worn service shoes squeaked slightly against the polished floor. That's when I first noticed him. Not all at once, but in fragments that my exhausted brain struggled to assemble. The sleeve of what was undoubtedly a bespoke suit. A wrist adorned with a watch that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. Long fingers, manicured but masculine, wrapped around a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. I kept my eyes down as I approached, the way we were trained to do with high-profile guests. Good evening, sir. Can I get you anything else tonight? Look at me when you speak. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that made my spine straighten automatically. The command wasn't harsh, but there was no question it was a command. I raised my eyes slowly, dark hair, expertly cut, with just a hint of silver at the temples, a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Dark, almost black in the dim lighting, they held mine with such intensity that I couldn't look away even if I wanted to. They didn't just look at me, they dissected me, cataloging every detail, every flaw, every secret. Behind him, nearly invisible in the shadows, stood a broad-shouldered man whose stillness somehow conveyed more threat than any movement could have. I apologize, sir. I managed to find my voice. Would you like to see our dessert menu? One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. No, just the check. As I turned to retrieve it, another wave of dizziness hit me, stronger this time. I gripped the edge of a nearby chair, willing myself to stay upright. Just 20 more minutes. 20 minutes and I could go home, relieve Mrs. Patel, hold Lily in my arms, and forget for a few precious hours that our existence hung by the thinnest of threads. When I returned with his check, he didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, he studied me with that same unsettling intensity. You're unwell. Not a question. A statement of fact. I'm fine, sir. Just a long day. The practiced lie slipped out easily. He didn't respond, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He reached inside his jacket, a movement that caused his silent companion to shift almost imperceptibly, and withdrew a slim leather wallet. Without looking at the check, he placed a black credit card on top of it. Process this. Another quiet command. I took the card, noting the weight of it, different from the plastic ones I usually handled. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back, a physical sensation like fingertips trailing down my spine. At the terminal, Marco appeared beside me, his eyes widening when he saw the card in my hand. Is that... he began, then abruptly changed his tone. Why is Mr. Russo getting his own check? His meals are comped. Always. The name registered vaguely in my fog-filled brain. Russo. As in Alessio Russo, the man whose name was whispered in the staff break room. The owner of half the waterfront properties in the city. The man whose business dealings were never explicitly discussed, but understood to exist in those gray areas between legitimate and something else entirely. I didn't know. No one told me. Panic rose in my chest. Should I go back and just process it normally? Marco hissed. And don't say anything else to him. Just smile, thank him, and leave. When I returned to the table, I placed the card and receipt before him with hands I couldn't quite keep steady. Thank you for dining with us, Mr. Russo. We hope to see you again soon. He signed the receipt without looking at it, adding a tip that made my eyes widen before I could control my reaction. It was more than I'd make in the rest of the week combined. Your name. Again, not a question. Harper Wilson, sir. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. As he stood, I was struck by his height. He wasn't extraordinarily tall, perhaps 6 feet, but he somehow seemed to tower over everything in the room. Power radiated from him, not just in his obvious wealth, but in the absolute certainty with which he moved. You should eat something, Ms. Wilson, before you collapse. The concern, if that's what it was, felt out of place coming from him. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded. He moved past me, his shoulder nearly brushing mine, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, more primal. His bodyguard, because that's undoubtedly what the silent man was, followed 2 steps behind. I watched them leave, the restaurant staff parting before them like the Red Sea. Only when the heavy oak door closed behind them did I realize I'd been holding my breath. The rest of my closing duties passed in a blur. My hands moved on autopilot, wiping down surfaces, refilling salt and pepper shakers, restocking napkins. All I could think about was getting home to Lily and collapsing into bed for the precious few hours before my morning shift at the coffee shop across town. My bag felt unusually heavy as I slung it over my shoulder, my body finally giving in to the bone-deep exhaustion. I waved a weak goodbye to the kitchen staff and pushed through the back door into the alley behind the restaurant. The night air hit me like a physical blow, cold and damp against my overheated skin. Another wave of dizziness, stronger than before, made the world tilt alarmingly. I reached for the brick wall, my fingers scraping against the rough surface as my knees buckled. Down I went, the concrete rushing up to meet me. A distant part of my brain braced for impact, but my senses were already fading, darkness creeping in from the edges of my vision. My last conscious thought was of Lily, waiting for me, needing me. Then nothing. Nothing until a voice cut through the darkness. Deep, commanding, familiar. Get her in the car. Now. Hands lifted me, strong and sure. I wanted to fight, to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. I was floating, disconnected from reality. Boss, should we call an ambulance? No hospitals, too many questions. My doctor will meet us. The voices faded in and out, as I drifted between consciousness and whatever lay beyond it. I was aware of movement, of being placed on something soft, of a warm weight covering me. Her bag. Check her bag. She might be on something. Boss, there's a baby bottle in here, and diapers. Formula. A long silence followed this revelation. It had changed, hardened somehow. Find out everything about her. Everything. I want to know who she is, where she lives, and most importantly, where that baby is right now. Panic surged through me, providing enough adrenaline to fight back the darkness. I forced my eyes open, tried to sit up, to speak. My daughter. They were talking about my daughter. Lily. I managed to croak, my voice barely audible. Please. My baby. A face swam into focus above me, dark eyes. Alessio Russo. Where is she? The question was soft but filled with a terrible intensity. Mrs. Patel, neighbor, watching her. Please, I need to get home. She needs me. I was begging, dignity long forgotten. Nothing mattered but Lily. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to someone I couldn't see. "Change of plans. Take us to her address. Now." I tried to protest, to explain that this wasn't necessary, that I just needed to get to my feet and catch the bus. But darkness was pulling me under again. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was Alessio Russo's face, his dark eyes fixed on me with an expression that might have been concern, or something far more dangerous. When I woke again, I was moving. The soft purr of an expensive engine, the smooth glide that spoke of quality suspension. My head rested against something cool and firm. A window. My body was curled awkwardly across a leather seat that smelled new and costly. "She's coming around." I forced my eyes open to find Alessio Russo watching me from the opposite seat, his expression impossible to read in the darkness, broken only by passing streetlights that cast strange, shifting patterns across his face. "Where are you taking me?" My voice was barely a whisper. "To your daughter." He spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if powerful men regularly escorted collapsed waitresses home to their babies. "You're suffering from exhaustion and malnutrition. My doctor is meeting us there. How do you know where I live?" Fear began to pierce through the fog of my exhaustion. "Your ID was in your wallet." Again, that matter-of-fact tone, as if the invasion of my privacy was of no consequence. I should have been terrified. I should have demanded to be let out of the car immediately. But all I could think about was Lily, and how I needed to get to her. If this man was taking me to her faster than I could have managed on my own, then so be it. The car slowed and then stopped. I recognized the crumbling brownstone where I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. Even in my state, I registered the incongruity of the sleek black SUV parked on this rundown street. "Wait here," Russo instructed someone, presumably the driver. Then, to my surprise, he opened the door himself and extended a hand to me. "Can you walk?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. His hand was warm and strong as he helped me from the car. The simple touch sent an unexpected jolt through me, so startling that I nearly pulled away. But I needed the support too badly to refuse it. We had barely taken 2 steps toward the building when the front door burst open and Mrs. Patel emerged, her small frame vibrating with agitation. She froze when she saw me leaning against a strange man in an expensive suit. "Harper. Thank God. The baby won't stop crying. I've tried everything." Her accented voice was pitched high with distress. "Who is this man? Are you all right?" Before I could answer, Lily's wails reached us even from 3 floors up, the sound tearing at my heart. I lurched forward, suddenly finding strength I didn't know I had. "I need to get to her," I gasped, already moving toward the stairs. To my shock, Russo swept me up into his arms as if I weighed nothing at all. "Which apartment?" he demanded. 3C, Mrs. Patel answered for me, hurrying ahead of us to hold the door. "The elevator doesn't work." He carried me up 3 flights of stairs without any sign of exertion, while I clung to his neck, too weak and desperate to feel embarrassed. All I could think about was Lily, her cries growing louder with each step we took. Mrs. Patel unlocked my apartment door with the spare key I'd given her. The place was tiny and sparsely furnished, but clean, the one standard I refused to compromise on, no matter how exhausted I was. Russo set me gently on my feet once we were inside. I stumbled toward Lily's cries, finding her red-faced and frantic in the second-hand crib I'd set up in the corner of the living room that doubled as her nursery. "Mommy's here, baby. Mommy's here," I murmured, lifting her into my arms. She was burning up, her little body radiating heat. The antibiotics hadn't worked, or perhaps I hadn't been able to give them to her properly. Rushing between jobs as I was vaguely aware of Russo standing in the doorway, watching us with that same unreadable expression. Mrs. Patel hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "She's been feverish all evening," she explained apologetically. "I would have called you, but you said not to unless it was an emergency. And she was doing better earlier, but then—" "It's okay, Mrs. Patel. Thank you for watching her." I swayed gently, trying to soothe Lily, but my own strength was fading fast. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision again. "Give her to me." Russo's voice was at my ear, his hands already reaching for Lily. Instinctively, I clutched her closer. "No. You're about to collapse again. Give her to me or you'll drop her." The truth of his words penetrated my fog of maternal protectiveness. Reluctantly, I allowed him to take Lily from my arms. To my amazement, she almost immediately began to quiet, perhaps startled by this new person, or perhaps sensing, as I had, the aura of absolute control that surrounded him. He held her with surprising competence, supporting her head properly, her tiny body secure against his broad chest. The sight of my daughter in the arms of a man who was almost certainly dangerous in ways I couldn't begin to understand was surreal. "When was she last given medicine for the fever?" he asked, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. 4 hours ago," Mrs. Patel answered. "Children's Tylenol, like Harper told me, but she spit most of it out." A sharp knock at the door made us all turn. Russo nodded at Mrs. Patel, who opened it to reveal a silver-haired man carrying a medical bag. "This is Dr. Reeves," Russo said. "He'll examine both of you." "I can't afford," I began. "I didn't ask." The finality in his tone brooked no argument. Dr. Reeves examined Lily first, his gentle hands and kind eyes at odds with the clinical efficiency of his movements. I sat nearby, fighting to stay conscious, terrified of what he might find. "Ear infection," he announced finally. "Fairly severe. She needs a different antibiotic than what you've been giving her." He looked at me with professionally neutral eyes, but I could sense the question behind them. Why hadn't I taken her to a doctor sooner? The answer hung in the air between us, obvious in the sparse furnishings of my apartment, the worn clothes I wore, the exhaustion etched into every line of my face. No health insurance, not enough money, the terrible calculations of poverty that forced me to gamble with what I loved most. "I'll write a prescription," Dr. Reeves continued, reaching for his bag. "And she needs fever reducers administered properly." Alessio Russo had been standing by the window, Lily still cradled in his arms. She had fallen into an uneasy sleep, her flushed cheek pressed against his expensive suit jacket. He hadn't seemed to mind when she drooled on it earlier. "Your turn," Dr. Reeves said to me once he'd finished with Lily. I shook my head. "I'm fine, just tired." "Harper," Russo spoke my name for the first time, and the sound of it in his mouth sent an inexplicable shiver through me. "Let the doctor examine you." Again, that tone that wasn't quite a command, but somehow compelled obedience. I submitted to the examination, too exhausted to argue further. "Exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition," Dr. Reeves concluded, his voice matter of fact. "You need fluids, rest, and proper nutrition." He glanced at Russo. "She should be hospitalized." "No hospitals," I said quickly. "The bills would destroy me even more thoroughly than I already was. I just need to sleep." "I'll have someone bring supplies," Russo said, ignoring my protest. "Fluids, proper food, everything the doctor prescribes for both of them." Dr. Reeves nodded, seemingly unsurprised that his wealthy patient would have someone to dispatch in the middle of the night for medical supplies. He packed his bag and left, after writing out instructions that he handed not to me, but to Russo. Mrs. Patel had been hovering anxiously throughout the examination. Now she approached me, her weathered hands clasping mine. "I should go home now, yes? You have help?" She glanced uncertainly at Russo. "Yes. Thank you so much, Mrs. Patel. I don't know what I'd do without you." I squeezed her hands, trying to convey my gratitude. After she left, an uncomfortable silence filled the apartment. I was acutely aware of how small and shabby it must look to someone like Alessio Russo. The second-hand furniture, the water stains on the ceiling, the bare minimum of possessions. I'd sold almost everything of value months ago. "You should lie down," he said finally, still holding Lily as if she belonged in his arms. I struggled to my feet, swaying slightly. "I can take her now." He shook his head. "Show me where to put her." Too weak to argue, I led him to the corner that served as Lily's nursery. He laid her in the crib with surprising gentleness, his large hands careful as they arranged her blanket. "Now you," he said, turning to me. I shuffled to the worn couch that doubled as my bed. I'd given the apartment's only bedroom to Lily, converting it into a nursery because she deserved at least that much normalcy. I sank onto the cushions, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been threatening to overwhelm me for hours. Russo stood looking down at me, his expression still unreadable. In the harsh overhead light of my apartment, I could see him clearly for the first time. He was even more handsome than I'd thought in the dim restaurant lighting, but there was something hard about his beauty, something dangerous in the set of his jaw, and the calculating look in his eyes. "Why are you helping us?" I managed to ask, the question that had been burning in my mind since I'd awakened in his car. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved around my small living room, taking in the details of my life with those penetrating eyes. He stopped at the small bookshelf that held my few remaining possessions. Some well-worn paperbacks, a framed photo of me holding Lily the day she was born, a cheap ceramic figurine of a dancer that had been my mother's. "Where is her father?" he asked instead of answering my question. The abrupt change of subject took me by surprise. "Gone. He left when I told him I was pregnant. His name?" I hesitated. "Why does that matter?" His eyes flicked to mine, and the intensity in them made me shrink back against the cushions. "His name. Harper." "Eric Lombard," I whispered, the name bitter on my tongue. "But he doesn't matter. He made his choice." A strange expression crossed Russo's face at the mention of Eric's name, a tightening around his eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. Then it was gone, replaced by the same inscrutable mask. Before he could ask another question, there was a knock at the door. Russo moved to answer it with the silent grace of a predator. A man I hadn't seen before stood in the hallway holding several bags. "The supplies you requested, sir." Russo took the bags and closed the door without a word of acknowledgement. He brought them to the kitchen counter and began unpacking them. Bottles of Pedialyte, children's medicine, several containers of what looked like homemade soup, fresh fruit, bread, and other groceries. "Your kitchen is now stocked," he said, turning back to me. "There's enough for several days. The medicine for your daughter is there with instructions." "I can't accept all this," I protested weakly, even as my stomach clenched with hunger at the sight of the food. "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." He approached the couch again, looming over me. "But we do need to talk about your situation." My heart rate accelerated. Here it was. The price for his help. There was always a price. I'd learned that lesson well enough from life. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Not what you're thinking." His tone was cold, almost offended. I'm not that kind of man. I wasn't sure I believed him. Men like Alessio Russo, powerful, wealthy, used to taking what they wanted. They always wanted something. He must have read the skepticism in my face because his expression hardened. "You need help, Harper. More than just food and medicine. You're working yourself to death, and for what? To barely survive in this place? To watch your daughter grow up in poverty?" His bluntness stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in his words. "I'm doing my best," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "Not everyone has options. I'm offering you one." He sat in the single armchair across from the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. In the small space of my living room, he seemed even larger, his presence filling every corner. "I have a proposition for you." My wariness must have shown on my face because he continued quickly. "A job. A legitimate position as a personal assistant at my home." "I don't understand," I said slowly. "You don't know anything about me, my skills, my experience." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you're determined, resourceful, and willing to work yourself into the ground for your daughter. Those are qualities I value." He paused. "The position includes living quarters for you and Lily, full benefits, including health insurance, and a salary that will be significantly better than what you're making now." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why me? There must be hundreds of qualified people who would want that job." His eyes held mine. "Let's just say I have my reasons." A chill ran down my spine. There was something he wasn't telling me, something behind this inexplicable offer that I couldn't see. "What would my duties involve exactly?" I asked cautiously. "Managing my household schedule, coordinating with my security team about visitors, handling personal correspondence." He waved a hand dismissively. "Nothing beyond your capabilities." "And that's it? Just normal assistant duties?" I couldn't keep the suspicion from my voice. His expression darkened. "I told you, I'm not that kind of man. If that's your concern, you can put it aside." Lily whimpered from her crib, and I automatically started to rise. Russo beat me to it, moving with that same surprising grace to check on her. I watched as he adjusted her blanket, his large hand gentle as he felt her forehead. "The fever's still high," he said, returning to the living room. "She needs medicine." I forced myself to my feet, wavering slightly. Russo steadied me with a hand on my elbow, the contact sending that same unexpected jolt through me. "I'll get it," I said. Together, we administered the medicine to Lily, who fought it weakly before succumbing to sleep again. Standing over her crib, I felt tears threatening. She was so small, so vulnerable. All I wanted was to give her a better life than this, but every day felt like I was falling further behind, drowning in a sea of bills and exhaustion. "She deserves better than this," Russo said quietly, echoing my thoughts with such accuracy that I stared at him in surprise. "Yes, she does," I admitted. "Then accept my offer." He turned to face me fully. "Come work for me. Give her the life she deserves." Put like that, how could I refuse? And yet, something held me back. "I need time to think about it. Take the night," he conceded. "I'll send a car for you tomorrow at noon. If you accept, be packed and ready to leave. If not," he shrugged. "The choice is yours." With that, he moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "One of my men will remain outside your door tonight, for security." Before I could ask why I would need security, he was gone, leaving behind only the scent of his cologne, and a decision that would change the course of my life forever. I slept fitfully that night, waking every hour to check on Lily. Her fever finally broke around dawn, her little body cooling as the medicine did its work. I held her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent, mind racing with the implications of Russo's offer. On one hand, it solved all my immediate problems: healthcare for Lily, a place to live, financial stability. On the other hand, I'd be tying myself to a man I knew nothing about, except that he had the kind of power that made restaurant managers pale at the mention of his name. Morning brought no clarity. I fed Lily, relieved to see her appetite returning, and began mechanically sorting through our meager possessions. If I accepted his offer, and I was leaning heavily toward doing so, what would I take? What would I leave behind? In the end, it didn't amount to much. Clothes for both of us. The few books I couldn't bear to part with. The ceramic dancer and the photo of Lily. Everything that mattered fit into 2 duffel bags and Lily's diaper bag. At exactly noon, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find a man in a dark suit, his expression professionally blank. "Ms. Wilson. Mr. Russo sent me to drive you if you've made your decision." I hesitated only a moment before nodding. "We'll come with you." He took my bags without comment and led us to a waiting car. Not the SUV from last night, but a sleek town car with tinted windows. He installed Lily's car seat with practiced efficiency, making me wonder if Russo's men were regularly tasked with such domestic duties. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the building that had been our home for the past year. I felt no regret at leaving it behind, only a gnawing anxiety about what lay ahead. The drive took us out of the city, through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we turned onto a private road that wound through manicured grounds. My anxiety ratcheted up another notch when I saw our destination, a sprawling mansion set back from the road, surrounded by gardens and what looked like a high-security fence. "This is where Mr. Russo lives?" I asked, unable to keep the shock from my voice. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "One of his residences, yes. One of them. Of course." We pulled up to the front entrance, where Russo himself waited on the steps. He was dressed more casually than I'd seen him before, in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The sight of him sent an unwelcome flutter through my stomach. He opened my door himself, offering a hand to help me out. "You made the right decision," he said by way of greeting. "Did I?" I murmured, too quietly for him to hear. He reached past me to unbuckle Lily from her car seat, lifting her with that same surprising competence. "Welcome home, little one," he said to her, his deep voice softening in a way I hadn't heard before. Home. The word echoed strangely in my mind as I followed him into the house. No, mansion was the only appropriate word for the soaring ceilings, marble floors, and obvious luxury that surrounded us. "I'll show you to your quarters," Russo said, still carrying Lily, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. "Then we can discuss the details of your position." He led me through corridors lined with artwork that even I, with my limited knowledge, could tell was valuable. We passed several staff members who nodded respectfully as we went by, their eyes curious but quickly averted when Russo glanced their way. Finally, we arrived at a wing that seemed more intimate, less formal than the rest of the house. Russo opened a door to reveal a suite of rooms that took my breath away. A spacious living area with comfortable furniture, a small but well-appointed kitchen, and through an open door, I could see a bedroom with the largest bed I'd ever seen. "This is... for me?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "For both of you," he corrected, indicating another door. "The nursery is through there. I had it prepared last night." I moved numbly to the door he indicated, pushing it open to reveal a nursery that looked like something from a magazine. A beautiful crib with a mobile hanging above it, a changing table stocked with supplies, a rocking chair beside a bookshelf filled with children's books. The walls were painted a soft yellow, with a mural of woodland creatures frolicking along one wall. "How did you—" I turned to him, speechless. "I have resources," he said simply, as if conjuring fully equipped nurseries overnight was commonplace. He set Lily down in the crib, where she immediately began exploring the soft toys arranged there. "She seems to approve." I fought back tears, overwhelmed by the contrast between this beautiful space and the corner of a living room that had been Lily's home until now. "Why are you doing all this?" I asked again, needing to understand. The truth this time. Russo's expression changed, hardening into something I couldn't read. "Get settled in. Rest. We'll talk over dinner." He moved toward the door. 7 o'clock. Someone will come for you. And then he was gone again, leaving me alone with Lily in our new, inexplicable life. I spent the afternoon exploring our quarters, discovering new luxuries at every turn. The bathroom with its enormous tub and shower stocked with expensive toiletries. The closet already filled with clothes in my size, tags still attached. Another smaller closet filled with beautiful baby clothes for Lily. It was all too much, too perfect, and it made my suspicion grow rather than diminish. No one did something like this out of the goodness of their heart. There had to be a catch. At precisely 7 o'clock, a soft knock came at my door. A middle-aged woman with a kind face introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. "Mr. Russo asked me to show you to dinner," she said, "and to offer to watch the little one while you eat." I hesitated, protective instincts flaring. "I don't know." Mrs. Chen's smile was understanding. "Of course you're cautious with your baby." "I raised 3 of my own. Why don't I stay here in your quarters with her? You'll only be in the dining room. If she needs anything, I can come get you immediately." Her reasonable suggestion and motherly demeanor calmed my anxiety. I agreed, showing her where I'd put Lily's things and explaining her routine, though I had a feeling Mrs. Chen probably knew more about caring for babies than I did. The dining room was smaller than I expected, intimate rather than grand, with a table that could seat 8 but was set for only 2. Soft lighting from a crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over the polished wood and fine china. Alessio Russo stood when I entered, his dark eyes taking in the simple black dress I'd found in the closet. "You look better," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Rest suits you." I sat, acutely aware of his proximity as he pushed in my chair. "Thank you for the clothes. Everything, really. It's overwhelming." He took his seat across from me, his movements fluid and controlled. "You'll get used to it." A server appeared, pouring wine and presenting the first course, a delicate soup that smelled divine. My stomach growled audibly, and I flushed with embarrassment. "Eat," Russo said, his mouth quirking slightly at the corners. "Don't stand on ceremony here." I didn't need to be told twice. The soup was the most delicious thing I'd tasted in months, and I had to force myself to eat slowly, with dignity. We ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of silverware against fine china. I was hyper-aware of his eyes on me, studying me with that same intense focus I'd noticed in the restaurant. "You said we would talk," I finally ventured, setting down my spoon, "about why I'm here." Russo took a sip of his wine, considering me over the rim of his glass. "What do you know about Eric Lombard?" he asked, the non sequitur throwing me off balance again. "Not much," I admitted, caught off guard by the mention of Lily's father. "We dated for a few months. He was charming, seemed successful. When I got pregnant, he disappeared." I shrugged, trying to seem indifferent, though the abandonment still stung. "Why does he matter?" Russo set down his glass with deliberate care. "Eric Lombard worked for me." My heart stuttered in my chest. "What?" "He was my accountant, one of them." Russo's voice was calm, but I could sense the underlying steel. "Until he stole $5 million from me and vanished." The room seemed to tilt around me. Eric, the man who could barely commit to dinner plans, had stolen millions from someone like Alessio Russo. It seemed impossible. I had no idea," I stammered, suddenly cold despite the warm room. "We weren't together long. He never mentioned—" "I believe you," Russo interrupted. "If you'd been complicit, you wouldn't be living in that apartment, working 2 jobs to survive." Relief flooded me, followed immediately by a new fear. "Is that why I'm here? You think I can lead you to him?" "No." His answer was swift and certain. "I already know where he is, or rather, where his body is." The blunt statement hit me like a physical blow. "He's dead?" Russo regarded me steadily. "Men who steal from me don't tend to live long, happy lives." The implication was clear. This man, this dangerous, powerful man sitting across from me, had Eric killed, and I was now living in his house, accepting his charity, letting him near my daughter. "I want to leave," I said, pushing back from the table, my appetite gone. "Now." "Sit down, Harper." His voice was quiet but filled with authority. "You're in no danger from me, neither is Lily. You just admitted to having my daughter's father killed. The man abandoned you both without a second thought," Russo said coldly. "Left you to struggle alone, pregnant and vulnerable. He doesn't deserve the title of father." He wasn't wrong, but that didn't make the situation any less terrifying. "Why am I here then? If not to lead you to Eric, and not for other reasons, then why all this?" I gestured around at the opulent room. Russo was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving mine. "Because she's my niece." The words didn't make sense at first. "What?" "Lily," he clarified. "She's my brother's daughter." "That's impossible," I whispered. Though even as I said it, connections began to form in my mind. Eric's dark eyes, so similar to the ones watching me now. The same strong jawline, though Eric's had been softer somehow, less defined. "Antonio was my younger brother," Russo continued, his voice flat. "He was always reckless, used different names, lived dangerously. I tried to give him a legitimate path, a position in my organization, but he preferred the thrill of the con." A muscle in his jaw twitched. Eric Lombard was just his latest identity. My mind reeled with the implications. "You're saying Antonio, was your brother?" "Yes. And the money he stole wasn't just from my business. It was from our family." Russo's expression darkened. "He betrayed us all. Did you know about me? About Lily?" My voice shook with the effort of controlling my emotions. "Not until last night," he admitted. "When I saw the baby bottle in your bag, something clicked. You mentioned his name and the timing fit. I had my people confirm it this morning. DNA tests from Lily's medical samples." "You tested my daughter without my permission?" Anger flared, temporarily overriding my fear. I needed to be certain. He didn't sound remotely apologetic. "She's family, Harper. My blood. The only part of my brother that remains." Family. The word hung between us, heavy with implication. If what he said was true, and the more I thought about it, the more likely it seemed, then Lily was tied to this man by blood. To his wealth, his power, and yes, his dangerous world. "What do you want from us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to provide for my niece," he replied simply. "Give her the life she deserves, the Russo name, the Russo legacy. And me? Where do I fit in this plan of yours?" His gaze intensified. "You're her mother. Your place is with her, helping her navigate this new world." He paused. "The job offer is genuine, Harper. You'll earn your keep, maintain your independence, but Lily will be raised as a Russo, with all the privileges and protections that entails. It sounded reasonable, almost generous, and yet... What if I refuse? What if I take Lily and leave? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. That would be... unwise, he said softly. Not because I would harm you, I wouldn't. But because out there you're vulnerable, my enemies. If they discovered Antonio had a child... He didn't need to finish the thought. The implication was clear. Staying under his protection wasn't just about luxury. It was about survival. So I'm a prisoner here. The realization was bitter on my tongue. No. You're family now. His expression softened fractionally. I protect my family, Harper, at any cost. The weight of everything, the revelations, the implied threats, the radical change in circumstances, suddenly overwhelmed me. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I blinked rapidly to hold them back. Russo watched me struggle for composure, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he reached across the table and took my hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip firm but not painful. I know this is a lot to process, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. Take time. Get to know the household, the staff. Let Lily recover fully. He squeezed my hand once before releasing it. We'll find a way to make this work. I wanted to argue, to fight, to run. But the truth was, I had nowhere to go, no resources to draw on, and a sick baby who needed stability and care. And if what he said was true, if Lily was truly a Russo, then perhaps this strange, dangerous man was her best chance at a secure future. I need time, I said finally. It's too much all at once. He nodded, accepting my response. Time you have. But remember, Harper, outside these walls, the world is far more dangerous than I am. With that ominous reminder, he signaled for the server to bring the next course. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, the house, the grounds, the staff I would be working with, but underneath it all, a current of tension remained. A sense that my life had irreversibly changed the moment Alessio Russo had found that baby bottle in my bag. That night, as I lay in the most comfortable bed I'd ever experienced, listening to Lily's peaceful breathing through the baby monitor, I tried to make sense of my new reality. I was now living with a man who had casually admitted to having someone killed, someone who, if Russo was to be believed, was Lily's biological father. My daughter was apparently the niece of a powerful and dangerous man who seemed determined to fold us into his world, whether I wanted it or not. The golden cage he'd constructed for us was beautiful, comfortable, safe, but a cage nonetheless. And I was beginning to understand that the bars were formed not of physical restraints, but of necessity, blood ties, and the shadowy threats that lurked beyond Russo's protection. Days slipped into weeks as Lily and I settled into life at the Russo estate. The rhythms of the household became familiar, the quiet efficiency of the staff, the heightened security that I gradually stopped noticing, the luxurious comforts that slowly ceased to overwhelm me. My duties as Alessio's personal assistant were straightforward but demanding. I managed his household schedule, coordinated with his security team about visitors, and handled correspondence that wasn't related to his business dealings. Those were managed by a separate team of professionals whose paths rarely crossed mine. I learned quickly that Alessio was respected and feared in equal measure by everyone around him. The staff were loyal and discreet, but there was an undercurrent of tension whenever he entered a room, a slight stiffening of shoulders, eyes that carefully avoided direct contact unless spoken to. Only Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, seemed immune to his intimidating presence. She treated him with respect, but not fear, sometimes even scolding him for tracking dirt into the house or working too late. He accepted her motherly reprimands with surprising grace, further complicating my understanding of him. With me, he was different. Not warm, exactly, but attentive in a way that made me increasingly uncomfortable. He sought my company in the evenings, insisting that I join him for dinner, even when he had business associates visiting. He asked about my day, listened with apparent interest to stories about Lily's development, and gradually began sharing small details about his own life. I learned that he had raised his younger brother after their parents died, that he'd built his business from nothing, that he rarely slept more than 4 hours a night, He never spoke directly about the illegal aspects of his empire, but neither did he pretend to be something he wasn't. And he was obsessed with Lily. There was no other word for it. He visited the nursery daily, bringing her gifts, watching her play with an intensity that might have been touching if it weren't so possessive. She was thriving under his attention, growing healthier and happier each day in our gilded cage. "She has Antonio's smile," he said one evening as we watched her playing on a blanket in his study. It was the first time he'd mentioned his brother since our initial conversation. "She does?" I studied Lily's face, trying to see what he saw. "Yes, the way it starts at one corner of her mouth." His own mouth curved slightly in unconscious mimicry. He had the same smile as a child. The rare moment of vulnerability surprised me. "You miss him." His expression hardened. "I miss who he was before he betrayed the family, before he chose money over blood." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in me for weeks. "How did he die?" Alessio's eyes flicked to mine, assessing. "You don't want to know the details. I think I deserve to know what happened to my daughter's father." He was silent for a long moment. "It wasn't on my orders, if that matters to you." "One of my associates discovered his location, acted without authorization." His voice was flat, emotionless. "It was not clean, not quick." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the room. "And this associate is no longer with us." The finality in his tone made it clear he didn't mean the man had been fired. I should have been horrified, should have gathered Lily and run as far and fast as I could. But where would I go? Who would protect us from the world Alessio had described? A world where Lily might be targeted simply for her blood. The devil I knew was proving, day by day, to be preferable to the devils I didn't. "Thank you for telling me the truth," I said finally. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging my words. Then, in a swift change of subject, "There's an event tomorrow night, a fundraiser. I'd like you to attend with me." I blinked, caught off guard. "As your assistant?" "As my companion." His eyes held mine, unflinching. "It would be beneficial for certain people to see you established in my household." The implication was clear. He wanted to send a message, that I was under his protection, that Lily was acknowledged as family. "What exactly would that entail?" I asked cautiously. "Wearing a beautiful dress, making conversation, standing beside me." His mouth quirked. "Nothing nefarious, Harper." The use of my name still sent that same inexplicable shiver through me. I don't know how to act in those circles. "Just be yourself. Your genuine nature is refreshing." Was that actually a compliment? "Mrs. Chen will watch Lily. A stylist will come tomorrow to help you prepare." It wasn't really a request, despite his phrasing. I was learning that with Alessio Russo, there were suggestions that were actually commands, and commands that were non-negotiable. "All right," I agreed, wondering what I was getting myself into. The stylist arrived the next day with an entourage of assistants carrying garment bags, jewelry cases, and makeup kits. I was measured, pinned, painted, and polished until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The dress they selected was midnight blue, elegantly simple from the front, but dramatically backless, exposing skin I wasn't used to showing. Diamond earrings that had to be worth a small fortune completed the look. When I emerged from my quarters that evening, Alessio was waiting in the hallway. He wore a tuxedo that highlighted his broad shoulders and lean waist, looking every inch the powerful, dangerous man I knew him to be. His eyes widened fractionally as they took me in. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you." I fought the urge to fidget under his gaze. "The dress is too much. The dress is perfect." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The fundraiser was held at a historic hotel downtown, its ballroom transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and power. As we entered, I felt the weight of eyes upon us, conversations pausing momentarily before resuming with increased intensity. "Everyone's staring," I murmured, gripping Alessio's arm tighter. "Of course they are. They're curious." His hand covered mine briefly, the touch reassuring despite my lingering wariness of him. "Just smile and follow my lead." Throughout the evening, he introduced me to countless people whose names immediately blurred together. Business associates, politicians, socialites, all greeted Alessio with that same mixture of respect and wariness I'd observed in his staff. With me, they were coolly polite, assessing, calculating what my presence on his arm might mean. "Alessio, darling, you've been holding out on us," purred a striking woman in a red dress, her eyes sweeping over me dismissively. "Where did you find this lovely creature?" "Harper is a recent addition to my household," he replied smoothly, his hand settling possessively at the small of my back. "And a welcome one. The woman, Elena something, I'd already forgotten her last name, arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Indeed. How interesting." The conversation continued in that vein, pleasant on the surface but with undercurrents I couldn't quite grasp. I smiled and nodded, grateful when Alessio finally steered me away. "You're doing well," he murmured, guiding me toward the bar. "Elena is a piranha. You held your ground. She seemed to think I'm your—" I hesitated, unsure how to phrase it delicately. "My mistress?" His mouth curved in that not-quite smile. "Let them think what they want. The reality is more complicated, isn't it?" Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. A man had entered, surrounded by an entourage similar to Alessio's security detail. The tension in the room ratcheted up noticeably. "Vincenzo," Alessio said quietly, his body language shifting subtly. He was still relaxed to the casual observer, but I could feel the coiled readiness in him, unexpected. "Who is he?" I whispered. "A business rival, one who doesn't respect boundaries." His eyes tracked the newcomer across the room. "Stay close to me." Vincenzo, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and a face creased with years of hard living, spotted us almost immediately. A predatory smile spread across his face as he made his way toward us. "Russo?" he greeted, his accent heavier than Alessio's. "What a pleasure." His eyes shifted to me, roaming over my body in a way that made my skin crawl. "And who is this exquisite creature?" "Harper Wilson," Alessio said before I could speak, his voice carrying a warning note. "My companion for the evening." Vincenzo took my hand, raising it to his lips in an old-world gesture that managed to feel both courtly and threatening. "Enchanted, Ms. Wilson, truly enchanted." The two men exchanged pleasantries that were anything but pleasant, each word weighted with subtext I couldn't fully understand, but could certainly feel. When Vincenzo finally moved on, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I'd like to leave," I said quietly. "Please." Alessio studied my face, then nodded. "We've made our appearance. It's enough." In the car on the way home, I finally asked, "What was that about, with Vincenzo?" "Politics," Alessio replied vaguely, loosening his tie. "Territorial disputes." He looked at me like I was a prize to be stolen. Alessio's expression darkened. "You noticed that, did you? I'm naive, not blind." I turned to face him fully. "Is that why you brought me tonight? To use me as a pawn in whatever game you're playing with that man?" "No." His answer was swift and certain, though I should have anticipated his interest. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face in a rare gesture of weariness. "Vincenzo has been trying to undermine me for years. He takes a particular pleasure in acquiring things that matter to me." The implication sent a chill through me. "And now he thinks I matter to you." Alessio's eyes met mine in the dimness of the car. "You do." The simple statement hung between us, charged with meanings I wasn't ready to examine. "Because I'm Lily's mother," I clarified. "Because she's your family." "Yes," he agreed after a moment's hesitation. "Because of that." But something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, suggested there was more to it. A complication neither of us had anticipated when I'd collapsed outside that restaurant all those weeks ago. The days following the fundraiser brought subtle but significant changes. Security around the estate doubled, with new men patrolling the perimeter day and night. Alessio canceled a business trip, choosing instead to work from his home office. And he spent more time with Lily and me, joining us for walks in the garden, appearing in the nursery at unexpected moments. I wasn't naive about the reason for these changes. Vincenzo had identified us as potential weaknesses in Alessio's armor, and Alessio was closing ranks in response. "You don't need to hover," I told him one afternoon as he joined us by the garden fountain where Lily was splashing her hands in the water, delighted by the spray. "We're safe here, aren't we?" "Of course." he replied, though his eyes continued to scan our surroundings. It's just a precaution. Because of Vincenzo? I kept my voice light, not wanting to frighten Lily. Alessio's jaw tightened. Among other concerns, I wish you'd be honest with me, I said quietly. If we're in danger, you're not, he interrupted firmly. Not as long as you're under my protection. He reached down to stroke Lily's dark curls, his expression softening as she beamed up at him. I won't let anything happen to either of you. His protective intensity should have reassured me. Instead, it highlighted the precariousness of our position. We were safe only because of Alessio's power, his wealth, his willingness to shield us. If anything happened to him, or if he decided we were no longer worth protecting, these thoughts kept me awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my luxurious bedroom as Lily slept peacefully in the nursery next door. When a soft knock came at my door just after midnight, I wasn't surprised. Something in the air had felt charged all day. A storm gathering. Alessio stood in the hallway, still fully dressed in the suit he'd worn to dinner, though he'd removed his tie and unbuttoned his collar. His face was shadowed with fatigue and something else. Tension, perhaps, or concern. "May I come in?" he asked, uncharacteristically deferential. I stepped back, allowing him entry. He moved to the center of the room, then seemed uncertain. Another rare occurrence. Is something wrong? I wrapped my robe more tightly around myself, suddenly conscious of my thin nightgown beneath it. No. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd never seen from him before. We need to talk. I perched on the edge of the bed, my heart rate accelerating. About? Us. He remained standing, his powerful frame taut with restrained energy. This situation. What about it? My voice was barely above a whisper. It's becoming complicated. He met my eyes directly. My feelings for you are not what I anticipated. The admission hung in the air between us, changing the atmosphere of the room. I'd sensed this coming, had felt the shift in his attention from mere protection to something more personal, more intense. I'm your employee, I reminded him, though we both knew my position in his household had always been more complex than that. You're the mother of my niece, he countered. You're under my protection. He hesitated. You're becoming important to me, Harper, in ways I didn't expect. I stood, needing to be on more equal footing for this conversation. Alessio, I don't know what you want from me, neither do I. The admission seemed to cost him. I've never been in this position before. I'm accustomed to taking what I want. His eyes held mine. But with you, I find myself waiting, hoping. My heart pounded in my chest, despite everything. His dangerous world, his admitted crimes, the circumstances that had brought us together. I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. The way my body responded to his presence, the comfort I'd begun to find in his company, the stability he provided for Lily and me. This isn't a good idea, I said, even as I took a step closer to him. There's too much at stake. I know. He didn't move, allowing me to determine the distance between us. But I find myself unable to ignore these feelings any longer. I took another step. We were close now. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the expensive cologne that had become familiar to me. What happens if this goes wrong? I asked. If we try this and it doesn't work, what happens to Lily and me then? Nothing changes with Lily, he said firmly. She's family. That's non-negotiable. He hesitated. As for you, I would never force you to stay if you wanted to leave, but I would hope you wouldn't want to. It was perhaps the closest thing to vulnerability I'd ever witnessed from him. Alessio Russo, the man who commanded an empire with absolute authority, was standing before me uncertain, waiting for my decision. I reached up, hesitantly placing my palm against his cheek. His eyes darkened at the contact, but he remained still, letting me lead. I'm afraid, I admitted softly. Of me? There was genuine concern in his voice. Of everything. This world you live in. The dangers. What it means for Lily. I took a deep breath. Of how much I want this despite all that. The confession slipped out before I could stop it. But once spoken, I couldn't regret the truth of it. Despite every rational argument against it, I'd fallen for this complicated, dangerous, fiercely protective man. His hand came up to cover mine where it rested against his face. I will always protect you both. With everything I have. Everything I am. And then he was kissing me, and I was kissing him back, and the world narrowed to just this moment. This feeling. His arms encircled me, strong and secure, and I allowed myself to believe, just for now, that this impossible situation could work. That we could carve out something real and lasting amidst all the complications. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he pressed his forehead against mine. "We take this slowly," he said. "One day at a time." I nodded, oddly touched by his restraint. One day at a time. He pressed a final, gentle kiss to my lips before stepping back. "Try to sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow." After he left, I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. What had I just agreed to? A relationship with a man who operated outside the law, who had enemies who would use me to get to him, who had brought me into his home initially out of obligation to his niece. And yet, beneath all my doubts was a certainty that had been growing for weeks. Alessio Russo would protect us with his life. And somewhere along the way, he had come to care for me not just as Lily's mother, but as a woman in my own right. Morning brought clarity, and with it, resolution. If we were going to do this, truly do this, we would need to establish boundaries, expectations. I couldn't simply be absorbed into his world without maintaining some independence, some sense of self. I found him in his study, already working despite the early hour. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening in a way that still surprised me. "Good morning," he said, setting aside his papers. "Did you sleep?" "Eventually." I took a seat across from him. "We need to talk about how this works, practically." He nodded, unsurprised by my businesslike approach. "I'm listening." "If we're going to be together," I began, "I need to maintain my own identity, not just be an extension of you or your world." "What does that mean specifically?" "I want to go back to school," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. I was studying nursing before Lily came along. "I want to finish my degree." He considered this. "It can be arranged, with proper security measures, and I need your word that Lily will be raised normally, or as normally as possible given the circumstances. School, friends, activities." "Of course." He leaned forward. "I want her to have everything, Harper. Every advantage. Every opportunity, without being drawn into the dangerous aspects of your business," I clarified. A shadow crossed his face. "My legitimate enterprises will provide more than enough opportunities for her future." I took a deep breath. "And one more thing. The most important thing." I met his eyes directly. "If we do this, if I commit to you, I need to know I'm choosing it freely. That I can leave if I need to, and Lily will still be safe and cared for." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, "You would leave her?" "No," I said firmly. "Never, but I need to know that my relationship with you isn't the price of her security. That she's protected because she's your family, not because you and I are together." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You think I'm using her as leverage to keep you? Are you?" I challenged. "No." The single word carried absolute conviction. "Lily is my blood. She will always have my protection, my resources, my name if you'll allow it, regardless of what happens between us." Relief washed through me. "Then yes," I said simply. "Yes to us, to trying this impossible thing." His smile was transformative, lighting his face in a way I'd never seen before. He rose and came around the desk, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. "You won't regret this," he murmured against my hair. "I'd better not," I replied with a lightness I was beginning to feel. "I've heard you're a dangerous man to cross." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Only to my enemies, never to those I love." The word hung between us, unacknowledged, but not withdrawn. Too soon to say it outright, perhaps, but present nonetheless. As if summoned by the shift in our relationship, Lily's babble came through the baby monitor on Alessio's desk. He released me with obvious reluctance. "Duty calls," I said, smiling. "Go. I'll join you shortly." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "We have time now." And as I went to retrieve my daughter, our daughter, in all the ways that truly mattered, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be dangers, complications, challenges unique to loving a man like Alessio Russo. But for the first time since Lily was born, I wasn't facing the world alone. We had protection, security, and yes, love. A fierce, unexpected love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. All because a Mafia boss had found a baby bottle in my bag.